Thank you very much. So about 2 years ago, my wife went into labor. And we went to the hospital and called our doctor. Couldn't find our doctor. She was nowhere to be found. So the hospital assigned us a doctor. We went into the room and they started hooking her up. Fetal heart monitor, blood pressure monitor. Seemed to be going pretty well. But then this doctor started panicking. She started screaming, the blood pressure's going up. I can't find the heartbeat for the baby. And she said, okay, we're going to do a C-section. So I'm sitting there thinking, where's our doctor? And then suddenly, our doctor walks in. She takes one look around the room. And she says, everybody stop and get out of here. The baby's being born. Don't you see the baby's head? And she drops down on her knees, puts her hands out, and gives birth to my son. Now, after the baby's safe and cleaned up a little bit, the doctor says to us, you know, this is a problem we see more and more with a lot of younger doctors. They're so caught up in the machines. They're so caught up in the fetal heart monitor, in the blood pressure, that they don't actually look at the patient. They're slowly losing the ability to think and reason and judge for themselves because they're so dependent upon machines to do the judgments for them. I noticed in my own work how human beings increasingly rely on technology to aid and even make their judgments for them. Anyone watching Wimbledon these days, you know that Hawkeye, this computer system, will now overrule and make calls for the players based on the video cameras and scientific simulation technology. Trillions of dollars of investments in very complex financial maneuvers are made and decided upon by computers without human intervention. Cars now supersede human instincts and human judgments, and soon cars, we know, will drive themselves. And then there's Watson, the question-answering machine developed by IBM that recently beat the two best human Jeopardy players and beat them quite handily. I'm sorry, it's now Dr. Watson. Dr. Watson has completed medical school in the last 3 months, and in that time, he has read every single medical article and journal in the history of medical research. But not just that. He's read every blog on medicine, and every acupuncture website, and every alternative medicine website. And he's accumulated all that information. So now, he's being used as a doctor's assistant in the hospital. And if you tell him, here are the symptoms, and here's the patient, Watson will say, there is a 73% chance that it's this, or there's an 82% chance that it's that, and there's a 70% chance that this drug will work, or a 25% chance that that treatment will work. And he will provide you the information to offer a diagnosis and decide upon a treatment. A pretty great tool, isn't he? And IBM is very clear to let you know that that's what he is, a tool. He's not there to replace doctors. But here's the question I'd like to ask Mr. Watson, Dr. Watson, excuse me. Who will be using whom? Think of a sailor who so relies on navigation equipment today that if it goes out, is lost trying to navigate by the stars. Or think of an architect like we just heard. Someone who, like many of the younger architects, I don't know him, but many young architects today are so used to designing on computers with simulation technology, they don't know how to draw outside of that. How is a doctor who gets so used to relying on Watson to offer the probabilities and thinking and the thought and the judgments about a diagnosis going to actually correct Watson's diagnosis? We risk, and we're in the danger of reaching a situation in which technology becomes so advanced that it moves from assisting human judgment to replacing human judgment altogether. There's a danger that we will be so reliant on technology that we humans will be thinking and judging less. There's a danger that we will more frequently hear those startling words that I heard 2 years ago. The baby's being born. Don't you see the baby's head? There's no field in which we are more eager to have machines that make judgments for us right now than in the military. The military is currently spending many, many hundreds of billions of dollars trying to develop what it calls ethical robots, or ethical architecture for kill decision machines. The idea is very simple. Humans, as you know, get scared. They get tired, especially when they're fighting wars. They get confused. They get angry. And they stop thinking clearly. And they make bad judgments. These judgments can cost their friendly soldiers' lives, but it can also kill innocent civilians. And we worry about our soldiers both killing each other, and we worry about them being brought before The Hague for international criminal charges. And so the military wants to create machines that will make these judgments for us, take it out of our hands. And as one of the people working on this project for the military, Ron Arkin from the University of Georgia, has said, quote, "It is fairly easy to make robots that perform more ethically and behave more humanely than humans on the battlefield." That's a shocking comment, right? Robots can behave more ethically and more humanely than humans. What does that mean? Well, one, as I told you, humans are often quite inhumane. We treat each other badly, we get tired, we make bad decisions, we don't act rationally. And the second, I think, is what's really important. We're dissatisfied with our inhumanity. We're dissatisfied with our fallibility, with our irrationality, with the fact that we often fail. And we're looking to correct it, and we're turning increasingly to machines to prevent us from making these kinds of mistakes. So the question then is, that I want to ask is, what do we mean by humanity when we say that robots can be more human than humans, more humane and more human? Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, offered a definition of humanity. He said man is a political animal. And he meant something very specific by that. He said that man speaks with other men and acts with them in public. And when you speak and act, when Martin Luther King gets up and says, "I have a dream," other people talk about that. They speak about it, they act too, and they judge it. And it's in those judgments that we come together and we come to agree about what we think about Martin Luther King's speech or some act, that we form a political community. So that to be human, Aristotle says, is to act and speak, and thus to live in a political community in which we build that community by sharing judgments together, by creating our own common sense. Immanuel Kant defines a human being as a rational animal. And if you understand that, there's two parts to that. There's the rational and there's the animal. So on the one side, we're rational, we follow rules or we think. On the other side, we follow our irrationality, our sensibilities. And Kant's point is, in order to be rational, which we are, we have to sort of subordinate our sensibility to our rationality. But he's no fool. He knows humans will never do that because humans are irrational as well as rational. And so Kant says that to be human is to be fated to fail to live up to our humanity, namely our rationality. Hannah Arendt, another thinker, the thinker of the 20th century, says that human beings are earthly. Man is of the earth. What she means by earth is that we are created. We are a gift, and the gift of who we are is beyond our control. We can't govern ourselves. We're governed by fate, and we don't control our fate. She says that's one of the essential conditions of humanity, so that at the root of the human condition is finitude. Now, what all three of these thinkers, Aristotle, Kant, and Arendt, say about human beings is that we are fallible. We make judgments, but the judgments don't follow rules. There's no truth to them. We have to build the world in which we make judgments. And it's in the process of making judgments, sometimes good judgments, sometimes bad judgments, that we as a people come to share beliefs in what we believe in. And that's what politics is. So that the human being is the free and thoughtful effort. Being human is the free and thoughtful effort to make common judgments together. Now, I bring this up because in recent years, with the rise of technological the technological age, grounded in exponential growth of technology, a new understanding of humanity has emerged, and its primary proponent has been Ray Kurzweil, who I'm sure many of you know. And Ray Kurzweil has a very different definition of humanity. The human being, he said, is not really human. He's a machine-human hybrid. And the core thought underlying Kurzweil's philosophy, if we can call it that, and I think we can, is that man is that being who, quote, inherently seeks to extend its physical and mental reach beyond current limitations. Right? So if Kant, Aristotle, and Arendt say that man is a limited being, a fallible being who has to come together and make judgments together without knowing that they're true, Kurzweil wants to say that man will transcend his fallibility, will perfect himself, overcome his limitations, will move from being a biological to a non-biological entity, will put nanobots in our bloodstream that will conquer aging and death, will have implants in our bodies that will augment our senses and allow us to, in a sense, know the truth, commune with the intelligence of the universe. He says in the end, we will become cyborgs. Now, I bring up Kurzweil here because his radical reimagination of humanity, his vision of a benign, or rather rapturous, refashioning of humanity, is something I think we must think about and respond to today. I'm not a prophet. I don't know if what he says is going to come true, but I do know that we are already, as I've been talking about today, in our day-to-day lives, ceding more and more of our human judgments to machines. This is what Kurzweil wants, actually, to have more of our judgments governed by rational machines or machine-human hybrid judgments. But what do we lose as humans when we turn to machines like this? Let me suggest that we lose the experience of human judgment, the experience of what makes us human. The turn to technology, we turn to technology because, in a sense, we're already ashamed of our humanity, our need to make judgments that aren't true, that are fallible. And what this tells us is that technology is not the cause of our loss of judgment and our turn to machines to judge. It's simply a symptom. It's a symptom of our desire to overcome our humanity. You can see this desire, and you can see its failure in the New York Times today. The front page of the New York Times today has a story about 100 different cases in which U.S. CIA and other intelligence officers are accused of torturing and, in some cases, killing prisoners of war in the war on terror. One interesting thing about the article is it doesn't use the word torture. It uses the word interrogations. This has been the policy of almost every major journalistic organization in the United States for the last 8 years. And as the New York Times ombudsman said, this president, namely Obama, and his attorney general say waterboarding is torture. But the previous president and attorney general said it's not. On what basis should a newspaper render its own verdict? And so we have in journalism, they said this, they said that, we just give you the facts. We don't make a judgment. But it's not a fact. It is a fact that what's going on is torture. We can then disagree about what we should make of that. Is torture good? Is it bad? And honestly, what I'm saying is, in order to have that political conversation where we need to make judgments about torture, we need the facts. We need to know what the facts are. And the refusal to talk about the facts is a problem. It's a refusal to make judgments about basic facts in our world that I'm talking about and turning them over more and more to machines. And what I'm suggesting is that we need to recapture a culture of judgment. How do you do this? Well, you can't teach judgment. Judgment is something you learn by doing it, by examples, by failing, talking to people, getting corrected, and doing it again. What we need to do is find spaces of judgment in our culture where people can judge and have practice and experience and gain the habit of judging. One such space of judgment is juries. Alexis de Tocqueville, who wrote the book Democracy in America, says that juries are the great incubator of judgment and of American democracy because they teach people the habit of judging right from wrong. We live in an age in which juries, and the judgments they lead to are ever more rare, despite the fact that the Sixth Amendment guarantees a right to jury trial in criminal trials and the Seventh Amendment guarantees a right to jury trial in civil trials. 4.3 of federal criminal trials in the United States go to jury trial. And 1.2% of civil cases go to jury trial. Why? Because we don't trust juries. Increasingly, juries are seen as unreliable, uneducated. They nullify the law because they think the law is unjust. And so the legal system is doing everything it can to prevent cases from going before a jury. Another space where we learn judgment is childhood. Right? You have to grow up, make mistakes, fail, get into arguments, get told what to do, learn to think for yourself. And yet, our childhood is ever shorter and shorter, right? We don't let kids fail. We don't want them to fail the math test. We don't want them to get hurt. And so we protect them from making these judgments. And part of what we need to do is let kids play, let kids get into disagreements, get into arguments, return childhood to the 18 years that it was, which is what we need at the very minimum for kids to become thinking beings again and not just following rules. So let me conclude and say that most of all, what we need is to be honest with ourselves. Our world is going to be a technological world. We will become more mechanized. We will become more technological. There will be fewer and fewer spaces for thought and judgment in our world. More of our judgments and our actions will be governed by machines and machine rationalities. There will be fewer opportunities to act as a human being unaided by machines. But fewer doesn't mean none. And so what I'm suggesting is that what we need to do as we go through life is remain alive to those instances when you can look at the world, see it, slow down, stop, and reflect. Think about it, and make a judgment unaided by machines. And then drop to your knees and give birth to a miracle. So thank you.